um, for our work session on May 9th, 2023. First up is Mr. Coward, but I don't see him here.
We called and reminded him that he's first on the agenda, but we can jump to the next if we want.
Let's go ahead and do that. If he comes in, we'll switch it around. So Ms. Caraway from our Director of Public Works. Health Department.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
What we have is, it's time to renew an MOA with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. We do it, it used to be a longer span, now it's 3 years at a time, so it's time again. And there aren't a lot of substantive changes, but this year we actually asked them to add lead. This basically covers, I don't know if you're very aware, but the Eastern Band does have a Department of Health and Human Services. They handle a lot of public health services, but not all of them. And so for inspections, food inspections, things like that, they have on-site wastewater and wells, but they don't have the food and lodging. And so that's where and also communicable disease, we collaborate with them on that as well, with the state especially, reporting to the state, et cetera. And they've been great partners in all of this, and this MOA has really allowed us to work together. We are charged by the law to do these inspections in all of our county, whether it's Eastern Band or not. This agreement allows everybody to understand that's what we're going to do. So that's kind of where we are, and as Don said too, there are some changes, and he can go through more specifically, but in essence, the original draft that they gave us added the lead part and then just changed a little bit of verbiage, so nothing substantive. So we actually would support going forward with this MOA. However, back at the end of April, I got a phone call from the state, and I brought my environmental health director here because we've had an ongoing issue with, Harrah's just built another tower, and with it came a beautiful infinity pool. Well, in North Carolina, we don't allow infinity pools. We're one of the last states that hasn't changed our rules, and we are going to probably change our rules, but that's not what's in law now. So we had to turn them down. Well, this has been going on about what can we do to get this pool approved, and we've come up with some ideas. It costs lots of money. So it's kind of put us at a standing point. So the tribe has been talking to the state, what could we do to get this pool open? And we, in environmental health, another nuance with public health is environmental health, we are agents of the state. So the state pretty much tells us what to do for environmental health. And so with this pool, I get the phone call from our state environmental health director saying, we've had a lot of conversations, we talked this out, and our solution is, as long as we're doing an MOA with the tribe right now, let's address the pool in there. We anticipate changing our rules, and there is no public health concern about this pool because we're going to change our rules, but we haven't yet. And so the state said to us, we'd like to put in the MOA that we're just going to exclude this pool from your inspections, from our approving. And once the rules change, take it back into play. That causes a pause in the whole negotiation of the MOA. And part of the concern from our end, I've had many conversations with Don. He's given me great insights I hadn't even thought of. My environmental health director, Alicia Parham, has some concerns just because of the can of worms it could open, liability it could open, and the precedents that it sets. Although I've been told by many people, don't worry about the precedents. With EBCI, sometimes there just are exceptions. They are a sovereign nation, so drop even the precedents. It's more of the liability end of things. And so where we are today is we need to plant the seeds of we really would like to get this MOA in place for being able to go in the restaurants, the daycares, everywhere, to do our inspections as we always have, and this needs to be done by the end of June. The pool, the state has given us draft language, which I believe Mr. Adams gave to you, so you've seen the draft language about the pool. That is something that we need to talk through more directly, especially with Mr. Adams, and with an attorney, I believe, to talk about that liability issue. It is very interesting to me that it was an attorney at the state that actually helped draft some of this, and it barely skirts on indemnification. So that's where we are.
Before we jump to the agreement, Tom, you and I are having a side conversation about why are they illegal and that's crazy because what you just said was it's allowed everywhere else.
Everywhere
We
else.
don't set these rules. So talk about that. That is a state, or maybe
This-
that's Alicia that needs. Let's talk about what is the state law for, what is an infinity pool? Let's talk about that.
And here's what's funny about the way North Carolina works. We have our general statutes, you all know that. And then administrative code literally tells us how to do those general statutes. Well, our environmental health, and you're welcome to chime in, Alicia, our code is booklets upon booklets of this is exactly what you must do. And infinity pools were not, they were said they were not allowed, period. Well, we just haven't gotten to that rule to update it because I don't know who decided there was a safety issue way back when, but many infinity pools have been put in and they're not a safety issue. And we're just
Not in North Carolina.
not, but in North Carolina, they are still illegal until we change the rule. It's just the way it works.
Is it public pool or is it private pool?
In the case of pools, it's the one unique thing that we actually inspect. It doesn't matter if it's private. Pools must be inspected. It's a real big safety concern in general. So that's why even our up in Cashers, our private pools, we still,
Yeah.
let me let Alicia, she's the expert,
I'd like for her.
Understand
The-
the big deal about it. All it is a pool that just drifts over the backside, just makes it look like it goes forever. That's what it's supposed to look like.
It's true that what you say exactly, and that's why I think the state thinks easy button, we're gonna make this just, it's okay, but if something happened about anything to do with this pool, it'd be great to have more language saying, well, we aren't in it.
So see, we all keep saying, oh, they're safe and this pool, how long has this pool been built with Cherokee?
It's been almost a little over 2 years.
2 years, and the state law has not changed. So one of my responses is at some point, we talk about the state law should change. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with that. I have no clue how safe an infinity pool is not or how fun it is. I've seen them, but I don't know if I've ever been in one. But the reality is this is not a new conversation for the state. And so the reality is they have not changed the state law, even though I guess for years now, everybody's been saying they're good and they're safe. So we have any idea why the state has not changed their laws?
It's a tedious process to change our laws, and I think they just haven't, it has come up because other places have asked for infinity pools, but I don't know the history of why they haven't changed it yet.
Now, you said that. Now, you say other places have asked for, you talking about in Jackson County?
Across the state and in Jackson County.
But they have not been allowed.
We've said no.
Said no. Okay.
Everybody across the state said no. And now the state is working on changing the rules, but we stand that until the rules changed, this is what we do. And if the state wants to make an exception, so be it. They feel comfortable with that. But I guess the caveat would be maybe even if this still goes in the MOA or if it's a different agreement, there potentially should be more conversation about indemnification of this county.
Right.
If it's, and I've asked the state, well, why don't you two just have an agreement, the tribe and the state? No, we're not gonna do that, and that would actually put more liability on you, so I still feel like this was just their first draft, it just happened, and so I want to know from everybody where we are so that I can go back and tell the state where we are, and we still wanna get the MOA, the rest of the story, in place by the end of June.
I think that the board would be more comfortable if the state took the onus on liability than ourselves, because we're not making the exception, the state is.
Exactly. And if anything happens, which we hope it won't, it's not even a real deep pool, is it?
No, it's 3 foot all the way through.
But what if something happened?
Right.
So give us a little history of this pool, if you would, Alicia.
So when the new section of the casino started, and the towers that they just finished for lodging, they proposed to also add this public swimming pool as part of this. It's a rooftop pool on the second floor of the entrance there of this new part of the casino, and they turned in a plan review to us at that time, as the law states that all pools have to go through a plan review and be approved, and then we actually do inspections as they build the pool. At that time, of course, it did not meet the state laws, so we did issue a letter stating that the plan review was not approved. It was a couple years later when was there actually looking at some of the restaurants and lodging that was inside of these new towers that we realized that the pool had been built.
They went ahead and built it anyway?
Yes, sir.
Although the tribe.
That's pretty much it.
So we've got two issues going on here that I don't want to speak. So the regional, another thing, this is a regional agreement. So when you look at this, this has a section in here that has nothing to do with other counties in this region.
I don't think it would belong here. It would be in a separate agreement that where the state absolved Jackson County from any responsibility if something happened.
And that was one of the things we asked with the state. I'd asked Shelley to go back to the state and say, could this be a because what I'm trying to not do is jeopardize. This is really important for us to maintain these other health inspections, you know, for the restaurants and for lead poisoning and things of that nature. And Shelley and I's conversations, you know, I know your concern has been really centered around not jeopardizing the health and safety and welfare by not conducting these inspections. But what has happened is the state has inserted this here. At minimum, what we had talked about is could this be a side agreement where we have attorneys look at this and ensure that we're indemnified? Because right now, the only thing it says in this agreement, it will be operated and maintained, regulated solely by the tribe, and shall not be inspected for or regulated by the division of counties. The tribe accepts sole responsibility for the rooftop casino. And see, that's where, from Jackson County's standpoint, I would want to turn that back over to legal and see if that really protects us. If we are basically not inspecting that particular pool, I just wonder if there needs to be, I think I jokingly said if we asked the attorneys to look at this, they would add 3 paragraphs of indemnification for the county. Just to ensure if somebody gets hurt on that pool, the Jackson County is not responsible, and or the state seems like they would want that too, as far as indemnification. And so that's really, from a legal standpoint, that's the concern I raised. And then obviously there's a fairness. You know, I think ultimately, Alicia, you said you've actually turned down, or there has been, you're aware there have been other infinity pools requested in Jackson County.
There has been.
Okay.
They've not actually submitted plans for them, but they have called to ask for approval to develop plans for them.
So that's another drive for us to talk to the state about making this a separate agreement, for the simple fact that it's really the state and the tribe that's trying to create this exception. Otherwise, the state should have just changed the law, and then everybody could build a pool, and we would inspect it if they chose to build it. But the reality is by coming up with this third agreement, then ultimately, this side agreement, then, you know, maybe we can frame it in a way that it's the state really pushing this versus us as far as making that exception. Because we may get feedback from other developments within our county that wanted this pool but could not get this pool.
That's gonna cause some problems.
Several that would want it.
Another thing about making it a separate agreement that would be nice is I feel like I've heard enough from the state they do intend to change the rule. Well, if this was a separate agreement, then it would be great later when it was a rule to change that agreement to, okay, now we're going to inspect the pools, rather than be waiting for 3 years in this agreement to come up again and stick it in there then. It's really to do with just this Jackson County pool. And I did get a suggestion about possibly just excluding all pools, but, you know, then that's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so.
Right. So do we need to ask the state for them to pull this, or I guess pulling pools out, creating a section specifically for this one pool in Jackson County, and we'll sign off on that?
Yes, and we've already asked for that once and they said no, and I think they were just waiting to hear. I told them, I said, I'm presenting this now, so now I will have the clout of the whole county saying,
When the casino builds their next tower, down in Murphy, it's gonna be an issue for that county. And if we allow it here,
That's true.
does that open up the door for them to circumvent the law there as well in that county? That brings other counties into the picture.
Yeah, I mean, if we approve this right here, and then say 3 years, during the 3 years, like she said, they go down there and build another one, they say no, but they build it anyway. Are we gonna put except for the rooftop pool at the casino and another one, make an exception, keep
Yeah.
making exceptions? It's just not,
And then that would be another county entering into that.
but I mean, say if Harris does another one, so.
I want to make a statement, clear statement, that none of this conversation has to do with our unwillingness to try to maintain the safety of the citizens that
Right.
that are in tribal lands. I mean, at the Eastern Band of Cherokee, this has nothing to do with that. If anything, we want to make sure that we're able to still partner with them and make sure that we can continue the health inspections that really keeps everybody safe. You know, a lot of times, you know, when you, the work that Shelley does is not bound by, you know, whether it be the Eastern Band of Cherokee boundaries or Jackson County boundaries. A lot of the work that's done can go across boundary lines, so it's really to the health of everybody. And so one of the concepts we talked about, and Shelley, you're talking to the other counties too, right? Thursday, because I think the response from other counties are going to be similar in the sense of they're not clear as to why this exception would be in a regional agreement. And what I would hope to do with the state is turn around and just say, hey, let's move forward with the regional agreement and then work on some type of side agreement. And if we're able to come to that agreement with the side agreement, then we would move forward, but not jeopardize this regional agreement. Even to the extent of if the state pushed back on that, Shelley, you and I talked about bringing the original agreement back to this board and asking you to adopt it so that it shows our willingness to maintain the health and safety and welfare of the restaurants and other inspections that need to take place in the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian.
Just in general, what would happen if someone come in Jackson County and they asked for one of these, they were denied, and they went ahead and built it anyway? And then a couple years down the road, you went down, went wherever and seen that it was already built, what would happen?
So they, by law, have to have a permit before they can operate the pool for the public. So what, at that point in time, we would issue notice that they did not have a permit and they had not received inspections or plan review approval. If they continue forward with it, then of course it becomes a legal matter that we would file against them.
Right.
That goes the same for a private pool.
So this is, it's kind of the private part of the pools. It's for public pools only. It does not, like an individual's residence, it does not apply to an individual's residence. It does apply if you have a private club or an area that has membership. You know, even if those is open to the public. So swimming pools, even though we don't inspect them for restaurants, swimming pools are inspected by those. So that's why if the private club is also part of a public swimming pool, but it does not apply to a residence of an individual at a house.
Tom can build.
I think there's consensus that we need to see better legislative writing on this that indemnifies us from any damage or responsibility.
So is the board willing to entertain a regional agreement without this exception? Because that, to me, that's the primary number one goal, is to move forward so that July 1, there's still restaurant inspections taking place.
Correct.
So is the board agreeable to move forward with that? And then with the understanding that there'd have to be further conversations about how this exception would take place?
Yes.
Yes.
On page 5, that would remove that exception as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Top of page 5.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So we would remove all references. So I can't exactly go back to the original one I won't go page by page, but there is, from this original one that was in your packets, um, there's some, other than the pool, there's some slight wording change. So what needs to happen is we need to implement the slight wording change that doesn't include the pool exception. And so when I say slight wording change, I mean like they remove the at signature pages and and I can go page by page and show it to you, but if we combine these two latest agreements and remove the exception for the pool, then I believe that gets you to an agreement that matches all the language that the state wanted, excluding the pool.
Do they have another pool on property?
Yeah,
they have
they have
multiple.
Up in there,
They have
right?
multiple pools, and we have just permitted all the remaining pools. So again, because it's an annual permit that they have to apply for.
Thank you guys for bringing that to our attention. Then.
Yes, and we look forward to something.
Yeah. All right, we'll go ahead and call Mr. Coward. Going to talk about Pinnacle Park Foundation and the request for funding the master plan.
Thank you, commissioners, and also Mr. Jones online. I'm here on behalf of Pinnacle Park. I don't represent the town of Silva. Pinnacle Park is a nonprofit corporation that was started back in the mid-90s, and I've been the chairman of it ever since. Pinnacle Park, as you know, is that 1,500-acre tract of land right out there. I'm sure that y'all have been there. When we first started working on Pinnacle Park, there weren't good trails anywhere in the park because they had not been maintained, and up on top of the Fraser fir had died and had fallen, and it was a jungle. And it was a mixture of committed youthful offenders in prison, clubs, Boy Scouts getting merit badges and Eagle projects, and community volunteers that over the years through Pinnacle Park Foundation, Inc., that produced what we have now as Pinnacle Park. It's become so popular that probably in any given day you can drive up there and there'll be 10 cars. On the weekends there'll be 20 or 30 cars, and people will come in and go out, and they hike in from Water Rock Knob. They come from every state in the union. They have a big race called the Assault on Black Rock every spring, and there's probably usually 20 to 30 different states represented in that race. So it's well known, it's well attended, it's well loved, but it is at a crossroads that I'm here to talk about. There's so many people in there, and there's so many ideas about how it should be used. Our board, which consists of local citizens, several of them are professors of variety of sorts at Western Carolina University, forestry, botany, and ecology. We have a really good board, some local people. I know you know Alan Farmer's one of our stalwarts. We have a good group of people, and we're dedicated to Pinnacle Park becoming what it needs to become. So about a year and a half ago, we sent out a request for proposal to get a botanical survey, which is what we wanted to find out is what's up there, where is it, what do we want to protect, what do we need to get rid of, like in exotic invasives like kudzu and honeysuckle, and there's about 10 different varieties that they've identified. We put the request out, and a company called Equinox picked it up, and the town of Silva paid $30,000 to get that botanical survey completed. It's been turned in, and we're still tweaking a little of it, but as you can see, it's quite thorough. Pass it around just to get a taste of what we're we were looking for when we got it. That was what was produced. Lots of maps, lots of data. There's history in there. As a matter of fact, I have already gave Tom one of these things, but I'd like for each of y'all to have it. This is a brief history of Pinnacle Park. And it starts from the very beginning and tells, well, no,
Sure, why not?
well, left mom with this doesn't go up until about 2016, I think. Yes, it's 2016. That was the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, and this was written to just commemorate our small part of the National Park System, which includes state and local parks. So now we have a pretty good understanding of what's there and what we need to get rid of and what we need to protect. This would enable us to find other uses, and one of the popular ones that has been suggested is bike trails and horse trails. And we'll probably consider that, but we have got to the point now where we need to take it one step further. We need a master plan for Pinnacle Park. This is simply a botanical survey that you are looking at. So it doesn't have a plan per se. That needs to be done by another company. So we have picked that same company to do the master plan. I'm going to give you the request proposal that we've sent out. We don't have a final version of what they proposed because we're in negotiations with them about some of the finer points. Yep. Yeah. So that's history. When we finally tweak the proposal that Equinox has made, we'll be able to produce what their proposal looks like. As part of Pinnacle Park Foundation plan, and again, I want to emphasize, I'm here on behalf of that foundation. I'm not here on behalf of the town. The town owns the property, but the town has never, ever done a good job of taking care of it. They haven't had the resources, they haven't had the dedication, they haven't had the willpower to do the things that we've done in Pinnacle Park. We had a lease with the town of Sullivan, a 25-year lease that enabled us to do things up there that the town just wasn't going to do. So it was the foundation that has made Pinnacle Park into what it is. Now the town of Sullivan, once they sold the conservation rights to Mainspring and then ultimately to the North Carolina Conservation for Land and Water, they had some money that they could devote to some of the things that need to be done. And the foundation has presented to the town over and over and over again projects for the town to do. That's always been generated through the foundation that I know of, never through the town. Town's just not in the business of running a park. That's what it boils down to. So we're seeking to put together a master plan, and you can see from the request for proposal what that would consist of. In our view, Foundation's view, this necessarily involves the county. We think the county would be well served if it had a more active role to play because it's got a Parks and Recreation Department, for one, and plus it has other resources that the town just doesn't have. So that gets down to money and the proposal, the request for proposal. We've had two proposals. One is for $137,000, one's for $150,000. We've chosen the one for $150,000 mainly because it looks like it's going to be more thorough. It's proposed by a company that have already dealt with Equinox. We're real satisfied with their product. We think that we can do better with a more expensive proposal. So we have gotten $50,000 from Town Silva through the trust fund that they set up when they sold the conservation rights. Each year it produces a certain amount of money that they can use on projects and have. But we need another 50. And I'm here on behalf of the foundation to ask the county to appropriate $50,000. Now, what that's going to produce is what you see in the request for proposal. We did the same kind of request with Equinox when we asked for botanical survey, and we expect to get that proposal. Part of that master plan also consists of a grant application with Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. If you're not familiar with that, that's the North Carolina State Fund that creates and maintains parks all over the state of North Carolina. And we've talked with them about that, about what they need from us in order to grant us the money, because this is ultimately seeking a grant from Cardiff to do the kind of things that we think need to be done in there, such as building trails, building parking lots, having toilet facilities, having wayfinding, having a vigorous website, having all those things that a real park would have. So if we get the grant that we're seeking, most of that would be supplied by the state of North Carolina. So the master plan is what leads to the Cardiff grant application, and this company is willing to do the grant application. We're also getting some stuff free that we're tossing in. One is a survey of the community, which is going to be done by a professor at Appalachian State. Also, we're going to be doing some parts of that grant writing through Southwestern Commission, and each of them have agreed to do that for free. So at the end, we would have a plan which would say, here's what we hope to do. We'd have a grant application, and if everything goes like we think it will, we would get the money from Cardiff in order to build it out. But they have to have certain things to go by on the grant application. One of them is a good master plan. So if the county would appropriate $50,000, we would have all the money we need to do a complete plan. Now, we have also talked with the CEO of Equinox, and there is perhaps some flexibility for maybe farming out some more parts of it if we can't get the full 50. But I think if we get the whole 50, we can have a plan that's not going to falter when it gets down to Raleigh, but will actually be accepted and actually lead to the money we need to build the park. So I'm asking for 50.
At the completion of the master plan, when maintenance becomes an issue, is that on our county's, I guess, under their direction with Parks and Rec,
Well,
in that maintenance schedule, or is that something that the part of grant will kind of go towards?
I think, let me hedge my answer somewhat, because the master plan is designed to figure that out, to figure out how it's funded, to figure out where your source of funds are. And I think knowing that the town is going to have that spinoff from their trust fund is a really good thing, because most parks don't have anything like that. But it produces $50,000 just about annually, unless there's a great recession. The plan would say, here's proposed to do it. My feeling is that if it became part of the Jackson County Parks and Recreation, that yes, it could be partially funded by the county. But I think partially funded by the county and partially funded by the town of Silva. And then we still seek grants. We still beg for money. One of the things that the master plan will address is the Friends of Pinnacle Park organization, which will be tasked with additional funding and maintenance, so that it's not something that the county necessarily would have to take on. For example, Appalachian Trail is maintained by volunteers who volunteer their time. The Carolina Mountain Club, I've helped them build trails before, and it's just volunteers. They get some money for some tools, but basically it's all retired guys who go out there and work on trails. The same thing happens at Paintertown. I mean, you've got Friends of Paintertown, and that's what they do. So the maintenance wouldn't be all that huge, but it could be worked into some kind of plan. And I
Lots and restrooms and things along those.
yeah, something. For example, Town of Silva sends a policeman up to Pinnacle Park twice, 3 times a day, and just make sure nobody's doing something they shouldn't be doing. They make sure one of those visits is after dark, and that's what they're willing to contribute as far as law enforcement is concerned. And you go up to Pinnacle Park, and you don't see much littering, you don't see any junk cars. You know, it's pretty well maintained. You don't hear of many crimes up there. There have been some spectacular crimes up there when they tried to lace the trail with nails. I guess y'all heard about that. That was somebody went up there and drove 16 penny nails into roots, then took a clipper and clipped off the head so it would have a sharp point, and they did it about 150 times in the trails. It took a week and about 50 people to find them and pull them all out. So, and I hope we got them all. We probably didn't. But. Yeah, we have a trail counter now. We have 2 cameras, and what we're doing with those cameras, and this is something that TDA helped us fund, is we're trying to count the number of people, where they're coming in, and where they're going out, how many of them, so we know how many people are actually using. We also have the weather station up there, which was donations and grants that is up at Pinnacle, and no, not Pinnacle, it's up at Fox Hunters Ridge, and you can get on website right now if you want to and find out what the weather is up there and what the weather prediction is going to be. So those are some of the things that we've been able to do here in this past year and a half while this foundation became more active. After the conservation easement was sold, and that meant that the townspeople can't extract any minerals or natural resources from it at all, except for water. Once that happened, we felt like, the foundation felt like, that we didn't need to have a lease anymore. We held the lease pursuant to a resolution the town had passed back in the early 90s to keep it for cultural, recreational, conservation kind of uses. So that's what enforced the ability to do that. Foundation was the enforcement agent for it. So when we dropped that lease because there was a conservation easement, Mainspring sort of took over all that. And then we had some dormancy that a couple of years ago, several of us said, we need to rev this thing back up. And we have. So we think it's got a great future. And I hope that the county will consider how it can team up and be a part of it, officially a part of Pinnacle Park. And let me add one more thing. I'm probably using up way more of my time than I'm allotted. But in 2017, the county of Jackson appropriated $250,000 to purchase of more property on the backside of Pinnacle Park. So when you look on the south facing side, you're only seeing part of it. Cherokee bought 500 acres, more or less, and so did the town of Silva. So we added a third more space on the backside now that goes all the way down to Black Rock Creek. So it's a 1,500 acre park on both sides of the Plot Balsams now. And one of the really unique things that happened at Pinnacle Park is that back in the early 90s, when we begin to say this is Pinnacle Park, not just the Silver Watershed. The Nature Conservancy bought 2,000 acres right next to it. The Trust of Civic Lands bought another 400 acres. The Southern Highlands Conservatory bought about 500 acres. The Trust of Civic Lands bought some, the North Carolina Conservation Trust bought some property. And what started out as little old 1,000-acre Pinnacle Park now is about 5,000 acres worth of public domain property. And in my view, that's a good thing. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Any questions?
Go ahead,
Mr.
Mark.
Chairman, if I may, excuse me, Mr. Howard. I might not have the exact verbiage, but isn't that the only designated Pinnacle Park, the only designated emotional healing trail in the United States?
I'm not sure it's the only one, but it is certainly one. And what that is, that there's a 5 mile, or 0.5 mile, half a mile trail at the bottom. If you've been up there, you've probably been on it because it starts in the parking lot and just crosses the creek 4 times. And it was designed by a man getting his master's degree in landscape architecture at Georgia Tech for free. And he mapped it out, and we built the trail. Basically, the Rotary Club built the trail. And it's now a trail. What'd you call it, Mr. Jones?
Emotional healing trail?
Yeah, emotional healing trail. And a lot of people just go out there and walk around it real slow and get healed.
But also, I'd like to mention that it's the only trail in or property of significant size in Jackson County that's open year round to hikers and bird watchers and outdoor enthusiasts that I'm aware of, because of our weather, most all other parks and trails are closed. And also, I just want to show I'm definitely in support of this. I think it's a great addition to Jackson County, and appreciate your history of the Pinnacle Park. I'm online, but I look forward to getting down there and getting it and browsing through it. I mentioned to Mr. Adams that growing up where I did on Coke Creek, we looked at that plot balsam my whole life, and I've hiked, camped, and fished from Water Rock Knob to Dillsboro growing up. That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Mr. Howard, if you look down on your screen, you can see what the commissioners are seeing. And so ultimately, you can see basically the maps we're talking about. This is information I spoke to them before. Of course, this is Pinnacle. So I see on the request for proposals that it's around 1,700 acres. So just to be clear, the master plan is for Pinnacle, for what we're all calling as Black Rock. And then is it also going to include the shut-in, which the...
No, we've not been able to partner with the tribe on that, but let me show you one other spot. We're trying to buy this tract here, and we have bought this tract right here. So the first one that was pointed out is under contract. The second one we've already purchased. The botanical survey was done for those, even though we didn't own them. It was included, and they would be included in the master plan. I feel confident that we're going to eventually close on that other one. So we're adding to it. Pretty soon it'll be around 2,000 acres.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we're all clear what the master plan would cover.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing, just for the board's information and for other people who's going through the budget process, the reason for the timing is based upon attempting to get the master plan done in time for the Partif grant. Is that
Correct. Ultimately, there's a hard deadline on the Partif grant. So we've got to get things done. We should already have this part done, but I won't go into why it wasn't done, but anyhow, it's not your fault. It was, but we do need to get this done as soon as we can because there's time and deadlines all the way through it.
When is the part of grant due?
Uh, I'm thinking it's October 30th, the application, and then they award it in January.
Do you think Equinox can have that master plan accomplished by then, or is it going to?
We're taking a great big deep breath and hoping so.
Yeah.
And if we miss the part of application, we'll just do it next year. Part of the reason we've got Southwestern and Appalachian working on it is to relieve Equinox from having to do some of that. One of that is a survey, which part of has to have. A survey has to be sent out to county population, and that answers to questions have to be turned in by a certain percentage so that part of can gauge the interest that people have in it. So, but that takes time too.
Yeah.
So if they're doing that while Equinox is doing other stuff, then we thought that was reasonable, and they're doing it for free.
Right. That's the best kind of pie.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
going
You do.
grab this back.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Coward. Moving on now to Ms. Fox from the Finance Department and Mr. Adams.
Ms. Fox is just going to give the board an update of the request of the information we provided to the board previously, just any updates to that information.
You'd be proud. I used this in a presentation the other day. I did. With the third graders, they didn't really get into it, but
You know, I've attempted to do that before with fifth graders, and I realized after about 2 minutes, they had no interest.
they had no interest in it, but I took it and I showcased it like Vanna White.
They probably were impressed.
They thought it was nice.
What we did, going through the meetings with all the departments, went through the first set and revised. We did make some revisions on capital and capital improvements and personnel. Just getting clarification from the departments of what they had intended. We did remove on the cashier's area, under capital improvements for the building addition, that'll come through a different process.
Questions by the board? I do have one. Well, it'll hit a different area. It's from the board.
And just on this note, reminder to the board, we do have a budget meeting, and as we did meet through, they are planning on attending. We do have the budget meeting scheduled, special call meeting at May 23rd at 9 a.m. And so currently right now, what we're going to have is between 9 a.m. and say around 11 to 11:30. It's hard to predict what their presentations are going to be, but we'll have in that time period, we'll have the Sheriff's Office, we'll have the Board of Education, Southwestern Community College, and the library. And then in the afternoon, we'll try to start early afternoon is we'll have the nonprofits to come and have any discussions. I was talking to Carrie about if the board wishes, we can provide lunch. Is that something? Because right now,
Lunch.
all right.
I like to eat.
So right now, what we'll do is we'll probably end up finishing the first set of meetings around 11, maybe try to eat around 11:30. And then I'm looking to start the afternoon presentations. I'm trying to get them sooner than later. So I'll try to get those started around 12:30. I mean, it's up to you. We could even do 12, I mean, depending on how much time you want to take a break. I'll put an hour in there for lunch and so forth. And then, so try to get the other presentations done about 12:30, and then try to leave a little bit of time after that for any questions. And then, you know, you do have your next set of meetings scheduled for, I believe, June 8th past that. But just letting you know, we will have I wouldn't say a full day, but probably 9 to about 3 scheduled for May 23rd.
Does anybody have any other questions? Okay.
So, thank you, Ms. Fox.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, the sheriff is planning on coming for the limited MAT grant application update. He said we're trying to schedule. I think he's going to show up around 2, and so we can do a couple things. I do have some other items to discuss, so it's up to the board if you wish to take a break and wait till 2, or if you want to start having other conversations, whatever pleases the board.
However you guys want to proceed, I say we just push on and get through the other items.
So if it's okay with the board, I am following up with the conversation, the question that Tom had.
Well,
Never mind.
just in time.
Hey, I'm good with that. If you're good with that, 12. Which is 40.
Yeah.
So if it pleases the board, the sheriff and I will just, and Sheriff, if you come up with me, go back and forth. I don't want to take all this really, we've been notified of the grant award, and we've been both working at different sides of this to try to figure out if the grant award actually would be enough. So what I'll do is I'll just pass out the information and we will begin the discussion. What I have is I wasn't able to change the budget here, so we'll just have to talk about the a little less than $6,000 difference. So what I'm giving them right now is just the reward letter. Okay, and then I've got this up here. There, it's just, that's the budget I have, it's tiny, we'll just have to change that to 12,000.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to change it. Although this letter states May 1st, we actually received an email May 3rd, last Wednesday, so it's basically taken us pretty much the entire week to figure out whether or not this award still creates a doable project. So as you can see, and I'm gonna apologize, I'm gonna pass this out, but I apologize for the small writing. I'll put it up on the screen if you can't see it here. So as you recall, the county, and Mark, I wasn't able to email this to you, so we're just having to get it up on the screen for you to see it. Uh-huh. Do you want to, I think it's good news. Do you want to go over it? Okay. So as you can see, we did receive, it's dated May 1st, but the sheriff and I received an email notification May 3rd, last Wednesday, that ultimately we did receive an award of $493,788. If you go and look at the budget document, just a reminder to everybody, what I provided to you in the budget document, if you can't see it on there, and hopefully you see it on the screen because I know the print's small. The original grant applications was $1.48 million. That was for a 3-year program. And so if you look, say, for the salaries here, that was for salaries for 3 years. You also look at the services and contract expenses for peer support services for 3 years, Vivitrol for 3 years, and then other expenses associated with peer support services for 3 years. And then we also had a fairly good administrative reimbursement there for 1.4 million. So the sheriff and I started having some conversations, and I believe we felt like that we could not go less than a 2-year position. You get somebody hired, it's going to take them 3 months before they can even get grounded to where they can start a position. And so we felt like he needed a 2-year position, so that's where the 161 comes from. What we ended up doing was collapsing the peer support services, so that's the 282 and the 42. It's collapsed down to 82,699, and we'll talk about where we feel comfort level of proceeding forward with peer support services. And then you can see the 243 is for the Vivitrol, and that shows you for 162 doses at 27 people. And then I can tell you, I've heard the sheriff and I talking about, do you agree? We literally just got a proposal for the admin cost while we were having this meeting. That cost is going to be around 12,000, okay, versus 6,400. So what will have to happen is we'll have to reduce the 82,000. We can't really reduce the salaries. We need salaries for 2 years, but we'll have to reduce the peer support services to bring that down to 12,000. And ultimately, we feel comfortable if you go back and look at the letter. There's some things that they require in the MOA that we would be required to sign, and they would recommend consultation with the maker of Vivitrol. They think we might can get it cheaper than what we're budgeting for, so they're just wanting us to go back and renegotiate. Develop detailed implementation plan on the Vivitrol for the 6 months. Clarify subcontractors, and clarify administration of the Vivitrol, and then submit a 12-month budget. Now, I have been on the phone multiple times with the state, and they are okay with the 2-year salary within this 12-month budget. Because if you look at the MOA, they're giving us 3 years to expend these funds. And so after I talked to them and explained the sheriff's and I's conversation that there's no way we can just get away with 12 months, they are okay with the budget that we've mentioned. And then as far as going back to the budget itself, as far as the support services, this was using we've gotten numbers from a company, Project Lazarus, out of Wilkes County. And if you look at their budget, there's a lot of travel and a lot of things there that was going to require them to create a new program here. And Sheriff, if you want to talk about a little bit, you've had some conversations about local programs.
Yeah, they did say they would have to have somebody come here to stay to focus on this program, but Don and I have talked, and as far as locally here, we have Blue Ridge Health, which has Meridian attached to it, and I've had conversations with them, and they offer the peer support that we're looking for outside the jail facility. Once they leave here, and I know everybody has trouble finding employment stuff, but they will help them with their education, workplace, and it's continual, not just find them a job and leave them in that. They find them a job and then they check up on them, make sure that everything's going well in their job,
And then as far as housing, they can help them with housing as well. Also, outside of that, the lady I spoke with yesterday, Mar- Chairman, we talked about, is it bupropion? How, uh, they have that available through Meridian. And if the Vivitrol is something that they want to start in the jail, and then they go outside the jail facility, and that doesn't fit their needs for recovery or whatnot, then they have that available that they could step off the Vivitrol and start that program. And it would be a monitored program that way that we didn't have to focus on here in the jail. Yes. And from what I spoke with her about yesterday, it seems like a good option because it's a 30-day shot as well. And the biggest thing, and I talked to her about the biggest thing is leaving options on the table for those that are in recovery, because what works for one in recovery won't work for the other. So that's the biggest thing is leaving options out there. And I think Blue Ridge Health and Meridian have those options available that they can help them with outside of the jail facility. So, but for us, because Vivitrol is a non-narcotic, the storage is not an issue. And as far as the dosage, we've got this figured at 27 people at 6 doses apiece. We don't have to purchase all those at one time, so we don't have to keep all those at hand at one time. So those can be purchased, say maybe enough for 10 people initially, and then the additionals can be purchased as we need them. So, I think it's a win-win for those that find themselves in a substance abuse issue. For us to have something available here in our jail facility. And we also, if they come in and they're already on a plan, say it be a Suboxone or something like that, we honor that if it's under a doctor's orders. We honor that already and take care of that. This just gives us another option for them, and not only for those who may have an opioid disorder, but also for those who have an alcoholic disorder as well. It's an option for them, and it will block those receptors as well for them. And it's been shown that for those that have an alcohol abuse problem, it really, really works well. The opioid side, it will work well, but that's not the only option that they have once they leave outside the walls. So, but we want to make sure we did leave options. So, but I think it only when we collapse this, as far as the peer support, I know Blue Ridge already gets grants, Meridian gets grants, so they already have these services in place. So it may not cost us as much, or it may not cost us anything on some of those levels. Some of that we may be able to use to buy more dosage units and to help more people. So, and this is a non-matching grant, so there's nothing coming from the county till into this. This is all provided for us.
So what I could figure is this programming, and we're talking about this, we initially talked about 3 years. This programming really, once we get going, I think we're going to shoot for about an 18-month programming. We'll hire the person before. Remember, we also have a $300,000 grant in the Dogwood that's going to help with some other costs. And then hopefully when we start looking at hiring, get this employee for the sheriff, get them integrated and ready to go, get us some contracts developed. We can develop a process on who we pick locally. We're using, you've had conversations with both Meridian and Appalachian.
And Appalachian, yes.
And we can go through and have conversations about who can provide the better service for us. And then we can enter into contracts there. And then ultimately, I'm excited about this because when you look at the Vivitrol, and we're able to get the individuals who are incarcerated to start the program, and then we transition them out, and then transition them, let's just use Meridian for now, Blue Ridge Health and Meridian. Then what happens is we still have to offer the Vivitrol. But once these individuals get into the into the professionals' hands, okay, as far as substance abuse counseling and so forth. Maybe they stay on Vivitrol for 6 months. Maybe they switch over to the alternative drug that's sort of an in-between Suboxone and Vivitrol. Or maybe they transition to something else. We can't pay for that something else, meaning we can only pay for the Vivitrol. But ultimately, I believe that under those scenarios, that's going to stretch this 162 doses out further than 27 people as we proceed forward. And it's going to give the county an opportunity to start developing contracts with these providers to help. If you remember, we're looking to build a support system that goes beyond dealing with incarcerated individuals, but trying to provide a more enhanced service to our community. So this gives us that opportunity to start building that relationship. And hopefully, if we are able to bring in the county's coordinator with that grant to help us look at it holistically and start coming up with overall plans, work with the jail coordinator position to help transition these individuals and start developing our contracts. Hopefully at the end of 2 years, well, before 2 years, we will have some real plans about truly coming up with options of where we spend our own opioid dollars. Because remember, we've been allocated opioid dollars. And so at the end of this, if we have a master plan, if we have systems in place where that's already been developed through the sheriff's office, then hopefully we come up with a long-term plan on how to best use our opioid dollars to serve our community.
Successes and failures and where we can better improve those services. For sure.
It is.
Grant is just 493,000 for the entire 3 years. Is it?
Well, it's for the year, but we've stretched out 2 years. We got 3 years in which to expend those funds. But now it will take, like,
Would we get another?
this is, as far as I know, there's not a maintenance grant out there for this right now.
This is just all we'll get for the 2 years.
Yeah, this is the second round that the state has put out. And the reason we're getting a lesser amount is there's 3 agencies put in for it. And I think they split that amount between the 3 agencies. And I'm not aware of the other agencies receiving grants, but I believe that's what's occurred, which that's great for all the agencies involved. So, but the one concern was the grant position for the person for 18 months to 2 years. Because when you tell somebody, look, you're in a grant position, 2 years, you're done. That's like,
Hard to recruit.
it's hard to recruit for that. So that's one of my concerns. So,
That's when the state does their time limited positions too.
right.
2 years.
But
So I'm not trying to commit the opioid dollars, but I think the longevity of any plan that we do, and that doesn't mean we're paying for this position or the other positions come on grant. The longevity of this plan, I think that the concept would be to use opioid dollars to continue past that. But this plan has to prove itself. Doesn't mean it automatically means we're going to spend our opioid settlement dollars on this plan.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I think you mentioned successes and failures and all of that. This is really good seed money for us to try to start these programming, and hopefully we can identify successful areas in which we, at that point, you can decide to continue to keep investing in with our settlement dollars.
Right.
and if they are maintenance grants out there, I will be wide open trying to get on board with those to make sure that we can continue the maintenance on that. So, and hopefully the cost of this Vivitrol keeps coming down. So, okay.
So the deadline on this for us, and this, I love it when we get our deadlines, but ultimately we do have to come back. And then tell you, this is what kept catching me, the 12-month budget for the award amount, okay? I've literally, I've talked to Nicole Solon. I talked to her 30 minutes again before this meeting because I told her we're going to talk about this. She is the director of reentry services. She is the one over this program. She worked for this individual here, and she has reiterated to me over and over that it's okay. They understand. They just want to see they want to see the budget and they're thinking of 12 months, but they understand we can develop this programming. I don't think it's going to last 3 years. That's the reason I'm saying I think we're going to have the employee for a couple of years, but I think the intensive program itself is going to run, with the monies we have, is going to run about 18 months once we get started. And so she understands, I've had this conversation multiple times. She's absolutely okay with what I've described, and she just hopes we accept it and move forward, and they hope we're successful.
I think there's unanimous decision in the moving forward with this. With a great hope that it's successful. And we can
Yes.
continue it.
That's what we hope.
So is there a consensus? I do need to put this in the upcoming meeting, and
Yes,
then
sir.
for the board to vote on authorizing the county and the sheriff, all the county staff and the sheriff's office to follow through and proceed forward with the grant.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Great news.
I'm excited. That's a really good seed money to help us go out and attempt to start building programs.
Right.
It's really exciting. Mr. Chairman, I was going through recreation. Mr. Stribling, Commissioner Stribling, we were talking about some issues I think that happened at Fairview Ball Field, so I thought I'd just follow up on that. That was asked. A couple of things. One was, I think one of the issues, several things that happened that day. One was in that particular day, was it rained all day, and one particular incident, and it's when JV was scheduled to play. So what happens? Varsity plays on their field, JV plays on Fairview. Generally, JV plays after Little League. So what happens with concessions in that scenario at Fairview is Little League runs concessions, and that's their fundraiser, and then they continue concessions into the JV. Jackson County Recreation does not run concessions for any of the baseball, softball games. And so what happened in that particular day, the complaints about no concessions was it rained significantly the night before, and the day Little League canceled. So they did not come in, and so they were not running concessions, so that when JV came, there was no concessions there. The other issue was, I believe, the scoreboard was not working, and that's a wireless transmitter. And so what was happening was Rusty, they were having issues, and every time Rusty would go down there to see if it worked, it was working. And apparently what it ended up being was some chip in the wireless system. And so Rusty would go and double check when he would get complaints, and then it would work fine for 30 minutes. Well, what would happen is over hours, it would stop working. So now what he's done is he's got a new chip in there, some new chip that's in for the transmitter, and he said he left it on for 6 straight hours for working. And so if it fails again, not quite sure what's going to happen. You know, he had it on for 6 hours. Apparently when it was getting warm or something, it was failing. And the final thing was the lights. And the lights, that is an issue we've been dealing with for a long time. And so in that particular case, there was one pole out. Lights get down and they're old fuses, and it blows the fuses. And so, you know, when they have their night games, that's not something that, you know, we have that requires full maintenance to go out. And so everything's been repaired, but occasionally there's lights going out. So I think what people saw that night was a combination of three, more than one thing. And it really questioned, it just, unfortunately, several things happened at once that really made it just look bad and interrupt operations. So we do the best we can. Hopefully transmitter works. Hopefully Little League stays to run concessions for JV, and we are still playing potluck with the lights out there until they get replaced, because when rain hits those fuses, they blow. So, I believe on that one. I do wanted to just let the board know that we did, if you recall, the request for proposal, solid waste that's going out, that we have finished those. You'll see it advertised in next week's newspaper. So we are going out for requests for proposals for all those solid waste operations. They will be due June 15th, and we will probably come back the mid-June to try to just give you a summary, but that won't be giving you a recommendation at that point because we just don't know who the contractors are. We're gonna have to go through and vet them, and so that, the way we've set this up is a goal of being, I believe, in contract with them by the 1st of August. So we have to give ourselves time to vet, come back, but we'll come back that mid-June and give you a summary of the bids received or the proposals received, and then we'll follow up with information after that.
Tom or Todd had a question about the facility at Fairview, about having a manned facility there because now it's just a recycling center.
I brought that up. We
Okay.
used to have a facility at Fairview, and now it's an unmanned recycling center. Just a couple containers out there for different ones. I didn't know if that was something that I know a lot of people that don't pay for the city trash service that go out, and the closest one is probably Webster.
They've been
Just
asking questions about
just
it.
asking questions. A lot of people have asked if that was an option or if that area was no longer available. Mainly because it's a long way if you're within the county, having to go outside to where the recycling centers are, because they're kind of in between a lot of areas. There's one in Glenville, so Cashers and Tuckasegee can hit that one. I don't know if there's where the one in Cullowhee is. It's right there by the fire station. So if you're in Tuckasegee, you're driving all the way out. But if you're just in city limits, you're driving out to Cullowhee to that recycling center.
There's one up 281 too.
There is.
Yeah, there's one up 281 about a mile on the left.
So I mean, there's a little bit of a gap in people that are closer to town where they go to get those services.
So
What do they want? A little substation?
Just a trash compactor, place to put their trash.
where are we talking about? I'd say that's where I'm not
Oh,
clear.
over at Fairview School,
Uh-huh.
right when you turn left to go into the school, there's Republic has two recycling containers. They're just recycling. So glass, cardboard, plastic, but no garbage. And it's behind the football field.
Yeah.
It's just a gravel parking
Now,
lot.
are those the communities or those the schools?
I'm
not sure.
They're not, I don't really, they're not on their schools. They're not on our, that's the reason I'm kind of sitting
Not
there.
gated. They're not.
They're not on,
there's
they're not
nothing-
our,
Well, people can use them
Well, maybe
even
they
if
should
it's
be
not the
gated.
school.
but that's the reason I'm sitting there going, now, where are we talking about? Because I'm not clear. That is not something that's county operated.
Right.
I think for now, what we would have to do is I need to get unit pricing through the bidding process.
Right.
And then right now I'm at a point.
That's the only reason I brought it
Yeah,
up.
I can't, I think it'd be real difficult for us to insert a new location. But I do think the board, but we can get the unit prices when the prices come in. And once we do that, we can negotiate new sites. I can tell you, as we're thinking about this, staff highly resistant to just unmanned areas,
Oh yeah, it would have to.
Okay, because it's, and then ultimately, it'll just come down to cost, right? In regards to, is there a better location? There is that one that's really right down the street from the transfer station itself. And then we would just have to look at overall costs when we get the bids in and see if there are additional locations and if it warrants it.
I just wanted to make sure that we had that on our mind as well when we're looking at these.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing, so if I could go through the bidding process, and then once we select someone, then I think in the middle of that that's when we would be, we're able to negotiate new sites and new, like if you take Republic right now, like, you know, under our current SRC operation, if we came to them and said, hey, we'd like for us to build a new SRC site, literally they'd come back to us and basically just, they would tell us the costs associated with their manpower. They would give us a price based upon their contract with us right now. And so I think we have that capability anytime during the contract. I just don't think I'll be able to do it in the bid process.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's- Yeah. Great. Any additional business?
I do have one, I don't want to jump in front. This other one's probably be a little bit longer, but I did want to talk about the VIA letter, if we could. But,
Okay.
But I don't want to. Are we ready to talk about that?
I think so.
Okay, so I think this one's going to be a good opportunity to talk about. So I did send an email out to all the board members on CC in regards to, this is in regards to a topic that's brought up, I guess, weeks ago, multiple meetings ago. And I really just got around to being able to draft the letter here in the last week or so, last Friday. So, if you recall, this was brought up, and this is something that was brought to Chairman Lex's and my attention when we were at one of the regional VIA board meetings. For months now, at least a couple of months, we've been being urged by VIA to try to write a support letter in regards to the proposed statewide Medicaid child and family specialty plan. Now, what you have, what I've sent out, I'll give you copies of, is the first page is, or the first staple packet is the proposed letter. The second and third and fourth, these are the letters that have been just circulating around for the last couple of months, going from the VIA regional board to the secretary, and then the secretary responded to everybody, and then VIA responded to them. All these letters were being circulated as far as support or non-support of the state of North Carolina going out and looking to move the child and family specialty plan to some statewide private tender. And so you look at the first letter I presented to you, it was almost verbatim from VIA, where they just wrote a draft letter, and it actually looked a lot like the regional board letter, that first letter that you see. And if you recall, our conversation or what was being discussed in front of the board at that time was that ultimately nobody was saying VIA is providing the best service. It just didn't make sense if we were going to switch statewide vendors. And so under that kind of initial conversation, that's how I drafted this letter. Now, since then, I have received feedback from board members. So I don't know if there's going to be an agreement or non-agreement. For me, just so you know, it's not so much as whether I support or don't support VIA, it's that none of these letters do I see anybody dealing with what the actual real issue is. And so, for example, let me just go through this letter real quick. See if I can find it. I believe I have it up here somewhere. I did. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure if I had it up here or not. So, as you can see, it's just a letter, proposed letter from the Jackson County to the Secretary of Kinsley. It does state in the first paragraph, it just basically says the Board of Commissioners has been asked for the last 2 months to provide a letter of support or concern regarding the Medicaid Child and Family Specialty Plan that would transfer management of the care for foster care youth to a larger statewide entity. And so what I did was I just attached the 3 letters that have been sent around, and then I put in bold that next paragraph, and most of the time that these support response letters have been exchanged, the Jackson County Department of Social Services has been housing children where placement cannot be found. And when we say housing children, we literally mean they're staying at social services, and we're having to pay employees to stay with them. Okay?
They have 2 rooms out at this one that they can do that with.
And so the point of that, the whole of that is just, hey guys, the whole time that these letters are being exchanged, this is happening. And so, just making a statement, it's extremely difficult to place children with higher level needs. We had one child, I was talking to our social services director, that they made over 100 attempts to place the child. It was a high needs child. It's a severe needs, when you get assessments done and so forth. The 100 attempts, and nobody would agree to take the child. And so what I'm was stating here was the board of Jackson County agrees these situations continue to be urgent crisis. I went on to say that next paragraph that we primarily support the last letter from VIA, and really what that's saying is the primary. When I say primarily, I don't say entirely. I say primarily. Primarily supports the last letter from VIA, the VIA Health Board of Directors dated April 24th, 2023. It also states the letter from the secretary, who is really condemning all the stats about what's occurring with our children, which are and this is statewide, what's occurring to our children, that with these needs, we're just not meeting goals. And I believe the letter from the secretary is correct and accurate. But I also state that the letter from the secretary doesn't address the needs either. And the needs are the issue of placement faced with on a daily basis by DSS agencies. The lack of provider and institutional capacity is the crisis. Right? And I believe that we had talked about a little bit before, the rules have changed, things have happened where we don't have as many areas or many institutions that we can place these children for service. And so it went on to state it seems that no agency is significantly addressing the issues such as staffing shortages, the lack of licensed and available foster homes, and the lack of facility beds to keep up with demand. The current system is not working. And so this is where there may be discussion. There probably is discussion amongst the board. Went on to state the Jackson County does not believe that the solution is to change administrators statewide. This does not address the lack of provider institutional capacity. It just changes the administrator. VIA did provide examples from Georgia about once it went to a statewide administrator that you have lack of access and so forth. If you go to the next page, it does talk about opposing a statewide Medicaid child and family specialty plan that is administered by one entity. I do want to emphasize, and again, that also may be a discussion amongst the board here, but I do want to emphasize this last paragraph. Instead, we request that the North Carolina Governor's Office, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and the North Carolina Legislature focus on the real issue of building provider and institutional capacity. These additional strategies should be implemented however they need to be implemented, either directly by DHHS or through the MCOs or however they want to do it. And then hopefully it can be done even if they proceeded forward with the 18th long process of changing the administrator. Hopefully they start working on that. And then there is another letter I wanted to just show the board that it's interesting. This letter really had just come out. I hadn't seen this letter before I tried to draft this one. And this is really from that's a long word. It's basically the statewide Department of Social Services Association and all the LME, MCOs, the VIAs and Sparkies of the world. And I won't go through this verbatim, but all this is really saying I will focus on the third paragraph on that first page. Most recently, we meaning the MCOs and social services department, the statewide organization, have discussed the need to address the challenges that center on the regulatory and licensure work performed by the Division of Health Services Regulation. Specifically, we are hearing providers cite licensure suspension and revocation concerns as a primary reason for their refusal to accept certain referrals. This is specifically talking about why it's hard to place children. And so, in addition, many of us have experienced, us meaning DSS agencies, situations where out-of-state providers have decided not to expand services in North Carolina, citing the regulatory environment as a primary reason. Additionally, additional concerns include construction issues and facility closures that have decreased statewide bed capacity for timely and appropriate placements. So, I guess the emphasis that I just put here that I think we would find our social services agree, the state association social services agree, is at the end of the day, via or not via, whoever it may be, they just got to work on the increase in capacity. And you can see right here, this last letter really focuses on also the rules that's come down from the state that has caused closures and things of that nature.
Right.
And so I threw this out. I'm trying to close this up for a letter that via they lobby for letters, and then you have other organizations that lobby for letters, and going back and forth with the support. That is kind of my point about just trying to notify with the time of these 3 letters going around for the month or so of what we're dealing with, and really the focus, whoever it should be, is to try to build out capacity.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to the board for discussion
Um,
regarding this.
capacity is the outlier here, and it's not getting any better no matter what the provider is. They're not, if provider A comes in, they're not building new beds. They're just aiding with the placement and taking over the Medicaid, the healthcare portion of it, which is their most concern, that financial portion of it to them. So I think that this letter, drafted as is, does a good job at stating that we don't care who it is. The problem is the beds. The problem is the placement of the child and how much effort it takes to just get one person in a bed, in a safe bed. So for us, it's.
So
I mean, I don't think that there's going to get a change if we change providers.
I don't either, no. But after 20 plus years, maybe it's time to try somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, at what point would an employee be cut off if he didn't do their job? And I know I understand it's hard to find those places, but my wife's been in this for 20 years. None of her workers that's worked under her that I've heard has ever said anything good about dealing with BIA. That's my feelings. I mean, I support the need to change. We need, more facilities. And my wife used to work for a nonprofit. That's what they did. They licensed people to house foster children, and the state cut the funding for that particular segment. And so they had to pull out, and they moved back down to South Carolina. So I understand the state aspect of it, but at the same time, you would think somebody's got to work within the rules and work better with the community to try to get them to take on more responsibility and build facilities and beds. And I know that's the state's job, but it's also the administrator's job to talk people into, hey, come on, we need these. And, that's my feeling. I support a change.
Yeah. So is there an amendment to this letter that you would prefer?
I don't know how you can word it.
So the only thing I would say is that first sentence on the first page where it says the county does not believe that the solution is to change administrators. And then the next sentence on the next paragraph on the next page, Jackson County opposes a statewide Medicaid child and family specialty plan that's administered by one entity. I just basically pretty much remove that and just say none of this is addressed the problem. And then we request that they all work together to start immediately address. I basically, if you eliminate those two sentences and reword a couple words, then pretty much it doesn't. What it doesn't do is it doesn't oppose a
Doesn't oppose,
statewide entity.
right, and it doesn't oppose VIA, it just says.
It doesn't oppose VIA. It doesn't oppose a statewide entity. But then what it does do is it says, we're just asking you to focus on the real need, and that's basically the build out of capacity.
I'll be okay with that.
Art, do you have an opinion on this?
Not at the moment. I'm still processing the comments and information. Thank you.
Because I think ultimately this is coming out from the board, okay? And I'm going to take us a look because this is a good opportunity to talk about your letterhead. And it seems sometimes you see, why are we talking about it? It seems simple, but sometimes it's not simple to send a letter out on letterhead that has each of your names on it, right? And so in my experience, if a board doesn't openly talk about what the process is, then you find yourself in conflict potentially later if a letter goes out with something you agree or disagree with. And so generally speaking, what I've seen is more successful ways of the letterhead with all your names is it only goes out with things you agree on as a board. And that means even if one of you disagree, okay, then that doesn't stop you as chairman writing a letter, doesn't stop me as county manager writing a letter. But what it does do is it is about that letterhead with all your names.
Right.
And then, so like if you were going to do something as chairman or as a commissioner, you're doing it as an individual commissioner. And so then you have to be careful about representing yourself as representing the board versus sending a letter out as, I'm just using an example as chairman, I oppose or I'm in favor or whatnot. Whereas this letter really identifies the board, right? And it's really important for us, if y'all are in agreement with that, to come to that type of agreement. Because I've seen boards get into a little bit of conflict over a letter going out without them all agreeing to it. And so is that the standard we want to? That's the standard I'm using right now.
Right.
So.
I think that's the standard we should use as a group.
If all our names is going to be
Right.
we should all be in agreement. If not, I mean, would it be wrong to have differencing opinions as far as a letter, like say myself and Tom was on one letter, this is our opinion, and then the other board member saying this is our opinion on it.
Yeah,
I know that gets a little complicated, but
I think you go down the road. That's where I talk about chair or man. I write letters all the time, so I have to as a manager that kind of relates to this or doesn't relate to it. I think you might want to be. I think the reality is there's nothing that stops you as an individual commissioner from picking up the phone and calling the legislator and you acting as a citizen elected leader. I think if you ever go off, I would recommend if you ever go off on a tangent like that, then you always make it clearly known that you're not representing the board. I mean, or Jackson County, for that matter. And the only way that really can happen is if the majority of you, if you all agree with the letterhead, that's one thing. But now sometimes we're going to have to take action where it's a 3-2 vote or a 4-1 vote. Okay, and from that particular standpoint, we do have to follow through with those types of things and a lot of times that's me versus your letterhead, because now I'm following through with the majority of the what the board has chosen to do, And so I do sit there. I don't sit there and say, three of you voted this way and two of you voted this way. I say, this is what Jackson County's doing. And so I just mention anytime if you're going individually, you're an individual commissioner, you're an individual citizen, you have a right to, as much as anybody else, to go out. I just would always recommend that you always clearly state if it's not the board, then it's you as an individual.
I think, seeing the draft language, with those amendments would be helpful.
Okay.
And then we can proceed forward.
I'll just bring back money because to me, I already thought about when that response. I already thought about it, and I looked at it. I think, oh, yeah, a couple sentences right there. I don't have to rewrite it. I think if we're going to weigh in on anything, weighing in on something needs to be done about capacity. Because
Providers aside, we don't have the capacity.
we're not, and so that's where if you take the letter from the secretary. That's the reason I'm trying to give you read everything from the secretary. That's coming back and it's identifying all these statistics that are not good statistics in regards to child welfare. At no point does he talk about what the problem. I mean, he talks about what the statistics are, but at no point does the state talk about where the real core problem is. And it's placement. That doesn't mean you don't have whole care for a child. Doesn't mean we don't have other issues. It means somebody told me this before. It's hard to talk about a fire plan when half of your building's on fire. I had that example thrown to me, and it's hard to talk about this whole list of concepts when the reality is we have certain issues that are real crisis right now that they need to be working on, and we can work out. That's my point about going through an 18-month process is fine, but hopefully you can do that and also work on the real problem that we're dealing with right now, and that's the building out of capacity. Okay, I'll bring it back Tuesday or next Tuesday. Yep. Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Chair. We do have closed session.
Okay. Since we do have closed session, let's take a 5-minute recess and come back. There was no action taken in closed session today. With no further business, no further items on the agenda, I'll seek a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Thank you, guys. We are closed.